Sorry, we had a few technical difficulties, but welcome to Global Oncology Rounds. Very happy to welcome Dr. Danielle Rodin here today, who's going to be with us not only for Global Oncology Rounds today, but Oncology Grand Rounds tomorrow. Welcome, Danielle, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Marias to formally welcome Dr. Rodin.
Perfect. Okay, everyone. So good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have everyone here. It's my pleasure to welcome you guys to Queen's Global Oncology Rounds. And we are having today Dr. Danielle Rodin. She's a radiation oncologist at Princess Margaret Cancer Center and assistant professor at the Department of Radiation Oncology, University of Toronto. She's the director of the Global Cancer Program at Princess Margaret, director of Equity, Diversity, and Professionalism at University of Toronto Department of Radiation Oncology, and also elected member of the board of directors of UICC. She has a clinical interest in breast and hematological malignancies. She's also a health services research with interest on health technology assessment, global health systems, and a large database analysis of costs and quality in cancer care. It's my pleasure to have Danielle here. I could be like the full hour just presenting her accomplishments and her CV, but welcome, and it's our pleasure to have you here, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Spot, and thanks so much, Fabio, for inviting me today. It's so nice to actually be here in person in Kingston, now that we're back to doing that, and hello to everyone online. So I'm going to speak today about our Princess Margaret Global Cancer Program, but a little bit more broadly as well around what I think many of us here see as the role of academic medical centers in really advancing global oncology. So I'll start by going through, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here around the importance of a global cancer control to a Canadian cancer center. I'll talk about the benefits of a programmatic approach to global oncology and discuss this concept that I think many of us have been talking about increasingly over the last while, importantly about how we can think about allyship with international oncology partners. You know, for many of us who work exclusively in the clinical realm, I think global health and public health was often seen to be a little bit divorced from what we see in the ward with our patients in the clinic. And I think there were many enormous challenges from COVID, but I think one of the benefits of it, if I can call it that, has been that it really did collapse these boundaries between global health and international health and what's happening to our patients. You know, what we saw that what happens in one health system with infectious disease in another country has a direct impact on the cancer patients in our clinic in front of us. And I think has brought this idea of interconnectedness to the forefront of many people's minds and really reminded us that the health of people in one part of the world is really inextricably linked from the health of our own. Mary Gospierowicz actually introduced me to the work of Peter Senge, who's an American systems scientist, and he's written a lot about this concept of systems thinking and this idea that we can think about systems as this discipline for seeing wholes rather than parts, for seeing patterns of change rather than static snapshots, and for understanding what he called the subtle interconnectedness that gives living systems their unique character. And basically, it's about seeing how different parts of a system are connected as part of a whole and single entity. And this systems approach we can think about and we can apply it to our thinking and interactions within specific diseases, within our own health systems, and between health systems. And we've certainly observed this over the last couple of years as well, around how fragile health systems in one country can directly affect cancer and management of non-communicable diseases here at home. And so I think it's also a very helpful lens to even think about this concept of what is a global health challenge. And it's really an issue that extends beyond the capacity of any one country to address. Now, cancer has not historically been an explicit part of Canada's global health agenda, at least going back historically, which Canada was much more focused on health promotion and primary prevention and less focused on cancer management. And back in 2017, the government of Canada launched this feminist international assistance policy. And this was actually focused on sort of women's health and women's issues and well-being of girls and women. But what it allowed was an entry point for a lot bigger and broader discussion around oncology. And it provided an entry point for discussion on cervical cancer and other broader international health issues. And this has been sort of what this so-called knock-on effect of this policy has been really that it's allowed cancer and cancer internationally and in low and middle income countries to feature in a much broader way as Canada's global health agenda. And I think our academic productivity as part of a Canadian global oncology community has really been in sync with these time trends. If we look back over the last number of years, you can really see over the last sort of 5 to 7 years how the number of publications from the Canadian community focused in global cancer control has increased. And there's been increasing calls for how Canadians can develop careers in this field of global oncology. And it has really been a bottom-up movement where a lot of practitioners and physicians and other clinicians coming through have seen this to be an important area worthy of building a career and of academic practice. But despite sort of this increase in scholarly productivity, there has been what's been called a lot of fragmentation within the global health community in Canada. And this was a series that The Lancet published back in 2018 and 2019. And really what it called on was this fragmentation, a lot of potential in Canada, but a lot of fragmentation. And they described Canada as a socially progressive force abroad using alliance building and collective action to exert influence beyond that expected from a country with moderate financial and military resources, but an exceptional degree of fragmentation across Canadian institutions concerned with global health, and really a missed opportunity to act more decisively with available resources. And this fragmentation wasn't just seen nationally in global health. You know, if we go back over 10 years ago, the University of Toronto had a number of global health physicians and academics get together and think about, what is global health looking like within the university? And to do this, they conducted a number of informant interviews with key individuals across the University of Toronto, including a big proportion of them who were with academic medical centers, clinician scientists, and teaching hospitals. And they said, we pulled out in this article a number of quotes from those interviews. And they talked about how at U of T there was a lack of vision with lots of small initiatives, but not an overarching system, structure, or principles to bring us together and create synergy. And maybe this is something you've seen over your own careers, at least for those of us in Canada. And they also said, there's a lot of people doing good things. There hadn't been a cohesive umbrella that would help catalyze and synthesize things. And we could be more efficient using resources to have a greater impact. And so, I think there's really putting this all together. There's been these growing calls to say that there's a lot of important global health work increasingly being focused within global oncology, but a huge amount of fragmentation historically within the Canadian system. The authors of this article look to the US and countries were organizing their own global health activities, and they pulled a number of examples. So in the first example on the left, you can see, Emory, Harvard, Hopkins, Yale, and University College London, where there was a central center for global health, which coordinated a number of these activities. And that center interacted with a number of different faculties across the university and a number of these different teaching hospitals. Other universities, BU, Brown, Columbia, George Washington, were organized a little differently. They had a Center for Global Health located within the Faculty of Medicine, and that Center for Global Health then interacted from the Faculty of Medicine with other faculties across the university and independently with these teaching hospitals. And you know, I think this article was very prescient, and this came out around the same time and actually called on academic medical centers to play more of a leading role within global health. And they were really seen as being integral in advancing the way that global health could be organized. So we saw how a lot of universities had these centers for global health that were separate from the different teaching hospitals. This article really called on academic medical centers to play more of a leading role. They were seen to be more independent from other economic or political interests, and they have the exclusive role of teaching doctors and healthcare workers and really preparing them for the upcoming global challenges. And in the words of the author here, he talked about how neither governments nor market forces can prepare us for the medical challenges within the next 10 years, and that research agendas need timely adaptations to medical questions and health issues that will cut millions of lives short from largely preventable causes. And I think that really has come to, you know, if we have academic medical centers as this potential leading force to provide a bit of unity and leadership within global oncology, can cancer centers as large academic medical centers play this role as well as part of this call? And many cancer centers internationally have started to think about building these global cancer programs, really to provide infrastructure, coordination, and dedicated funding to support and expand global oncology activities, to provide a program for career advancement within global oncology, and to support an ethical framework for engagement and capacity building in low and middle income countries. I'm sure there's other rationales that you can think of, but I think these are a few that have been used to justify building this kind of program. And a few years ago at Princess Margaret, in 2019, we started thinking about how we could build a global cancer program within our own institution. This process took time, and it took a lot of consensus building and engagement across the Cancer Center. And we started by doing a few things. We sent a survey out to the entire Cancer Center and asked people what they were doing within global health, had they been engaged in the last 5 years, and whether they were interested in doing more work in global health through their role at Princess Margaret. And while I certainly acknowledge a response bias in who answered on this survey, 61% of the respondents said they'd been engaged in some global health activity, and 87% had said they were interested in being involved in more global health through their work at the hospital. And so I think that really provided an important starting point for us to have these conversations. And we met with leadership from across the different departments to think about how could our global health program work with the different clinical departments, what experiences they had had, and also what challenges they had had in supporting staff and faculty to work in this area, so that we could be proactive and troubleshoot and gain momentum both from leadership and from people who were more clinical and on the ground. We then held a strategy retreat with people who had expressed interest based on the survey and based on other contacts. And we asked people, what would you like your global cancer program to look like over the next decade? How would you like this program to evolve? How would you like it to be structured? And this was a really important session for us to, again, build consensus and build some community around global oncology. And so in 2020, really just as on the heels of COVID, we officially launched our global cancer program with a vision to address growing disparities in cancer treatment within our communities and internationally, to improve health and to achieve equity in cancer care for all people worldwide. And with a mission to develop a program in global health and oncology that builds global capacity around delivering cancer services, conducting research with global impact, training the next generation of international leaders, and mobilizing our community to engage in collective action to advance cancer control. Our program is structured as a discrete program within the Cancer Center that's multidisciplinary and multi-professional in nature. I've been very fortunate to lead our program as the director, and I've really been supported by an incredible team, and who I'll introduce you to on our next slide. We have a program advisor, an international advisory committee, and a broad advisory committee made up of representatives from each of the different clinical departments, and as well as each of the broader departments within Princess Margaret. So, for example, from our broader Princess Margaret strategy team, from nursing and allied health, so quality education, we've tried to bring all of these different partners to the table. Many of you have, I think, interacted with at least some of the people on this slide. Leslie Chalklin is our program manager, and Larisse Kakarbi started this year with us as a research coordinator. And Mary Gosperitz has been our very trusted program advisor, who's been a wonderful support around global oncology and a real leader at Princess Margaret and internationally. We have, as I mentioned, representatives from the different departments, and each year we take on 1 to 2 trainee leads. Brooke was our former trainee lead and is now here at, nice to see you, Brooke, at Kingston. And we have 2 this year, Avneil Mittal and Arun Ghoshal. When we launched our program, we launched our global cancer program strategy and where we wanted to see the program going over the next 5 years. And we built it around 4 key pillars: our program development, research, education, and knowledge mobilization. And I'll take a little bit of time just over the next bit of this talk to talk through about how we've operationalized on each of these program pillars. Around program development, we look to establish partnerships that supported mutual learning to address inequities in both high and low income countries, and that advanced equity in cancer outcomes, that heightened awareness and greater connection among staff engaged in global cancer control, specifically within Princess Margaret as well. We're a big institution. How do we bring a bit more cohesion within our own center? And advancing global cancer control at Princess Margaret by beginning to track our impact. Princess Margaret has had a number of longstanding international collaborations, and we've been fortunate to benefit from a number of different partners over the years in different places. AC Camargo in Brazil, Aga Khan University in Nairobi. We work with City Cancer Challenge in Switzerland. We have a new partner, Davidoff Cancer Center in Israel, DKFZ in Germany, Institut Curie in France, King Hussein Cancer Center in Jordan, Moy Teaching and Referral Hospital as part of AMPATH in Eldoret, Kenya, Peter McMatt Cancer Center in Melbourne, Australia, Tata Memorial in India, and we are part of the broader University of Toronto Addis Ababa collaboration. Many of these collaborations evolved over a period of years, and each have taken on different opportunities depending on the nature of the partnership. One of the things we wanted to do when we established our program was to form connections between staff at Princess Margaret and other staff at our partner institutions. And one of the ways that these relationships become successful and impactful is really by having those relationships between individuals at the 2 centers. And one of the things that we launched during COVID was actually, as our program kicked off, we launched this Global Cancer Program virtual speaker series. And the goal of the speaker series was different than a traditional rounds and was really along different thematic areas. So, for example, we'd have one in supportive care or in thoracic oncology. We had one in nursing and ambulatory care, where we have speakers from, each one has had a slightly different format. We have speakers from Princess Margaret as well as from our partner institution share what they have each been working on and what they're doing over a defined period of talks. We've had other ones that have been more case discussions, and our quality program had led for 18 months a monthly speaker series focused on quality improvement with AC Camargo. The one shown here was a translational breast cancer research jamboree that we had with Institut Curie, and all of these have really been used to foster opportunities for people to learn about what one another is doing, to meet each other, and to really build those collaborations. We recently launched as well our Grand Round series, which forms actually part of our broader hospital-wide Grand Rounds. And we've been hosting monthly tumor boards with actually for a long time with King Hussein Cancer Center in Jordan and lymphoma. And most recently, we've had Tata join these rounds as well. Within Princess Margaret, we also wanted to raise awareness about what people were doing. And we launched a monthly newsletter that has been focused on different local achievements, funding and research opportunities, educational courses, and different conferences and workshops, really to raise awareness within the Cancer Center of different ways that people can engage with global oncology. We have our Twitter account, and we also have a small budget for small project funding to support individual investigators who are looking for small amounts of funds for individual projects. Around research, we aim to define programmatic research priorities within global oncology. We've been awarding we aim to award seed grant funding on competitive review for new collaborative initiatives and identify leaders engaged in global cancer control who can be mentors and supervisors for trainees in global oncology. So we launched with that our seed grant award program. And so I mentioned these are competitively awarded, peer-reviewed 2-year funding grants to support different collaborative initiatives. We've awarded 7 to date, and we are just in the process of awarding our 2022 to 2024 seed grants. The first year we ran the program, we ran it as a general call for seed grants. And over the last 2 years, we've had it along these thematic areas to actually try to hone in on what are the areas that we're looking to support. So the second year we focused on health equity as our theme. And then this year we focused on implementation science. The 2020 to 2022 awardees, who are our first group, recently presented in Grand Rounds on their work. This was a group from our cancer education program who collaborated with members from DKFZ, from AC Camargo and Tata to develop a science communication course. So how can academics and clinicians talk about science issues in ways that patients and lay public can understand and communicate with? And they developed it with our different international partners, really to make sure and that this is also broadly applicable in that global context. And how do you make this a more globally relevant type of course? So this course will hopefully be launched soon in the new year. The other awardee was between Princess Margaret and AC Camargo, looking at the impact of COVID-19 on quality, and particularly around colorectal and anal cancer. And so firstly, looking at patterns of care delivery during the pandemic, and secondarily, looking at the impact of the pandemic on specific quality measures between the two institutions. Last year when we ran, we were able to award 5 different seed grants in different areas, ranging from implementation of clinical services. So the top one on really about implementation of advanced radiotherapy techniques, to small clinical trials and education programs as well. So a broad range of different types of projects, all with international partners. And I think what's been really unique and special about this program is that we have encouraged as well a lot of trainees to be engaged. And so this has facilitated an opportunity to have them mentored by more senior people across the Cancer Center who are engaged. Around our education pillar, one of our goals was to develop curricula for trainees and faculty in health systems and global cancer control, to leverage new platforms to enable teaching and learning across international borders, and to establish global cancer fellowship opportunities with our collaborating institutions. Now, I think this was an article introduced to me by one of my colleagues, Dr. Meredith Giuliani, who's really an expert in cancer education. And this article talks about discourses of the global physician, and talks about how globalization is really this epistemological starting point for the way educators and policymakers and physicians conceptualize different physician competency in sort of the modern era. And these 3 distinct visions for for really preparing doctors to practice in a global environment have been described. And the universal global physician is someone who can be trained anywhere in the world using a set of universally applicable standards of competency. A culturally versed global physician is someone who's acquired culturally specific knowledge and training through exposure and experience and can be applied in culturally specific contexts, either locally or internationally. And the last one is the global physician advocate, which is a socially minded individual trained to understand the economic, cultural, and political determinants of health. And global physicians promote global health and use their positions of authority to advocate for marginalized populations. And this last one, this global physician advocate, I really want to draw attention to this last point around how global physicians can use this position of authority to advocate for marginalized populations. This is the one that we sought to develop and foster amongst our own trainees as well through these different training platforms. As we launched our program, one of the programs we are very proud to run is this Global Oncology Leadership Development Program, which we've called GOLD, and which some faculty from Queen's have actually participated in. Princess Margaret has over 200 fellows who come every year to train across the Cancer Center, and about 3/4 of them are international. And these people come to learn, of course, excellence in clinical care delivery, but they also often go back to their home institutions and are expected to become leaders in their own right and in their own environments. And we often recognize that in this training program, there was a bit of a missed opportunity to help foster and develop some of those broader leadership skills. So we launched GOLD really to foster these transformative leadership skills around intra and interpersonal communication, organizational and systems leadership training, healthcare management. This program also provided a community for a lot of fellows and opportunities to interact outside of their own clinical department. And people were paired with a mentor outside of their home department, really to also facilitate that kind of networking and exchange across the Cancer Center. We've now had 67 graduates from 32 different countries, and we have the current program that's just started. So we're excited to welcome, I think it's 27 or 28 new fellows into the cohort this year. Just to show you, we do pre and post course training and evaluation, and we looked at confidence across 24 areas of leadership for participants in the program. And we found some of the largest increases in confidence in participants' understanding of the basics of economics and financing of cancer care, appreciating global perspectives of cancer leadership, ability to influence change in a cancer system, expand professional relationships outside of their specialty or discipline, and apply knowledge of organizational politics and culture to different projects. We've also worked to develop and to support leadership in more international cancer centers. We partnered with a number of our partnering institutions to develop a UICC master course on comprehensive cancer centers. Again, going back to this idea around how academic medical centers can play this leading role and how to organize different cancer centers internationally. We ran this course last year and we'll be rerunning it with UICC. We'll be updating it over the course of the year in the new year. Now, in addition to leadership skills, I think a lot of global health and global oncology programs have worked to define what are some basic competencies in global oncology. What are some of the core skills that we think people need to be aware of and to know to develop expertise in this area? And there have been a number of publications that have, in different disciplines, attempted to define it. And I think there are challenges in defining these competencies, especially in a global context, but I think there has been sort of a move towards some consensus. So we partnered with a number of, actually the Canadian Association for Radiation Oncology, as well as the American Resident Radiation Oncology Organization, and launched this Global Oncology Enrichment Program. And this is actually not specific to radiation oncology. And we've actually had our participants, we've had 282 participants to date from 31 countries, learning about global oncology. This is a completely free online certificate-based course, which we see as a global public good and a way to contribute to that sort of knowledge sharing and education. Most of the participants have actually been from outside of radiation oncology, and we'll be running this course again this upcoming year. Some of the topics are quite broad around cancer prevention and screening, broadly in global oncology, leadership and advocacy, careers in global oncology, comparative health systems, concept of decolonizing global health education, and research and policy and practice. These sessions have all been held virtually, which has allowed a much more international group to participate. And we have run it live online the last 2 years, and this year we'll be running it as an asynchronous course. And so it's free for anyone to sign up, and registration is now open. And we also have tried to support and foster these global oncology fellowships and studentships at Princess Margaret. We have a program with DKFZ in Germany on an international clinician and medical scientist fellowship, where fellows can apply and spend a year at each institution and are co-supervised by PIs at Princess Margaret and at DKFZ. We've also had global oncology fellows within our department. We've had 3 to date, 2 of whom have joined us through the ASCO Global Oncology Award Program and have been able to conduct research related to global oncology with our program. And we've had now 2 Masters of Public Health Practicum students join us as well. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about this concept around knowledge mobilization. When we started our program, we wanted to create opportunities for national and international collaboration. When we were first looking at how to build our program, we tried to look and see what other programs were doing, and tried to reach out and connect with many other programs, and particularly in Canada. We want to think about how we can engage with other international and non-governmental organization and contribute to these global public goods, and how we can share learning among countries and regions through some of this more mutual collaboration. Jeremy Schiffman has written quite a bit around this concept of a global health network, which he's defined as a web of individuals and organizations linked by a shared concern to address a condition that potentially affects a sizable portion of the world's population. And he defined really 4 features of a network. One was around problem definition, and this idea of how do you generate internal consensus on the nature of a problem and solution. Positioning, how can you portray issues in ways that inspire external audiences to act. Coalition building, so forging alliances with external actors, particularly ones outside the healthcare sector, and this idea of governance, so establishing institutions to facilitate more collective action. And it was with that we initially in 2020 partnered with the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer to hold a virtual workshop with participation from leaders in global cancer control across Canada, with experts from low and middle income countries to really guide our discussion, to think about what are the priorities for Canadian initiatives and ongoing efforts within global oncology, what are the opportunities for maximizing the impact of ongoing efforts, and how can we develop a collective strategy to embed cancer within Canada's broader global health agenda. Dr. Verna Vanderpoy was one of the participants and speakers at this initial workshop, and I think she made a comment that really resonated with a lot of the participants and led to a lot of discussions around the kinds of relationships we want to have with a lot of external partners outside of Canada. And she made the comment, you have to understand me before you can help me. And I think that really informed a lot of our discussions on, as Canadians, how can we play a leading role, but lead with humility. Stephanie Nixon has written a lot about this concept of allyship, and defines allyship as this active, consistent, and arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating in which a person of privilege seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group of people. And when we think about allyship within global health, we can think about relationships between individuals in low and middle income countries who are often colonized with individuals from high income countries who are often the colonizers, and how knowledge generated in high income countries is often applied in low and middle income countries at the expense of local knowledge systems. And I think this has really, this discussion was very timely and has really formed part of this broader conversation around decolonizing global health. And I went back recently to some of the literature, and I found this article from 2016, and which was before I think some of the broader conversation really became mainstream around how can we decolonize global health. And they talked about different principles on how to engage with partners in lesser resort settings, and talked about, the first was around how do you engage interdisciplinary teams, and an ability for global health practitioners to work respectfully and collaboratively. The importance of developing equitable partnerships with shared leadership and stated common goals. The alignment of priorities and research agendas driven by the low and middle income country partner. Program management, problem solving, and financial oversight provided by the low and middle income partner. Again, education of trainees from LMICs being prioritized. Applications for research or programmatic funding opportunities are jointly conceived and written. And research conducted jointly with shared principal investigator and research team member roles, publication authorship and presentations, and broad availability of findings through open access publications. Now, this was in 2016. I think our thinking around this and some of the important issues has evolved since that time. But I think this really, started an important conversation around how we as Canadians and Canadian academic medical centers want to interact and engage with partners in low and middle income countries. And it was with that in mind that we've been very fortunate to partner with a number of cancer centers and institutions across the country, including Queen's, who's been such a wonderful partner in this, to develop the Canadian Global Cancer Network. And this network has really been launched over the last year or two with a vision to improve equity and reduce disparities in cancer control globally through pan-Canadian collaboration, with a mission to develop a pan-Canadian approach to global cancer control that facilitates effective and equitable partnerships, strengthens capacity in cancer control systems, and positions cancer within the Canadian global health agenda, and set out around 5 different pillars around advocacy and knowledge mobilization, education and training, research, partnerships, and network development. These are all areas where we can collaborate and work together to advance global cancer control in the Canadian context. And last year published on our network and on some of the principles and goals for the network around each of these different areas. And, I won't read through all of them, but I think provided an important starting point for us to think about how we can work more cohesively together and advocate more effectively in the Canadian context. And through the network, we also have our Canadian Global Oncology Workshop, which has now become an annual event. We hosted the first one with Canadian Partnership Against Cancer. Queens were the wonderful hosts of last year's workshop, and this year is being hosted by McGill. Registration is now open, so I'm going to use this opportunity to make my plug that I hope everyone listening today will be able to attend either live or virtually. And this has really provided an important opportunity for convening and for us to get together as a community to talk about what one another is doing and to think about how we can work together, and also to guide our thinking around how we should be working in the global context. So I thought perhaps I'll end with a bit of, a vision for Canadian academic medical centers and global cancer control, where we prioritize and promote health equity in cancer care for our patients at home, as well as our patients internationally. Where we have a vibrant national collaborative network of planning initiatives in research, education, program development, and policy. and where Canadians can have a meaningful voice in global cancer control, partnered with and guided by universities, institutions, and agencies across countries and resource settings, and with representation in global policymaking organizations. So with that, I will close, and looking forward to the discussion.
That's great. So we have, thanks very much, Danielle. Great presentation. Congratulations on your development of an incredible program. It has already had such incredible, profound impact across the world. Really amazing. It's been a great pleasure to be part of the network that you've created. And I think even before today's session, we're talking about how to fully realize our potential as collaborators and develop that network. So thank you for involving us in that. It's been a lot of fun. And if you can, please join us in Montreal next Friday. Is it next Friday?
Yeah, next Thursday night and Friday.
Yeah, next Thursday night and Friday. Yeah. Okay. So questions from the group, or we also have a large studio audience.
I have a question in the chat.
It's actually just sent to me, so I'm gonna read it out loud. So the question is from John, and it says, Danielle, thank you for a great talk. Are other radiation oncology health team folk, therapists, nurses, medical physicists involved in this global oncology effort?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm something there. No.
Is it
The
still
mute
working on
button.
your?
Yeah, are you trying to stop?
I think we're okay.
Oh, yeah, we
everyone
can
hear?
stop sharing actually.
No, it's good.
Oh, now better. I should know better. Yeah. You were muted still, I think, so.
No, it's unmuted.
Oh.
It's open. The mic is open.
Oh, mic's open, so now I get to hear all that. Okay.
Okay. Sure, I can. There we go. Okay. Yes, thank you for that question. So, we have really made a concerted effort to try to engage not just physicians, but our broader community across the cancer center. So, for example, Monique Van Preen, who's a physicist at Princess Margaret, had developed a physics mentoring program with one of the physicists in Eldoret, Kenya, and had started regular sessions around mentorship, and which led to a much broader initiative in sort of gynae Q&A and regular meetings and sessions between the programs. And I think we've tried to support that as well. So actually some of our seed grant awardees have been either in allied health and radiation therapy and physics. So it's by no means restricted to just physicians.
Thanks. Oh, I think we have a hand there. Okay. Yeah, just please put your questions into the chat. So maybe I'll just, so you've shown us your great achievements, great accomplishments. What are the challenge? What are the biggest challenges you're facing with the program and the network even?
Yeah, I think I think one has been how to engage people from across the cancer center and really get people excited about global oncology. There are people who are interested in it to start with, but we really do hope to provide different focal points for engagement from people who haven't been sort of traditionally as involved in global oncology, and how do we get people excited about it? And I think how do we sustain that over time? We've had, we have this gold program, for example. How do we better engage and sustain our alumni network through that program? And then I think for our, our international partners, we're constantly thinking about how do we work effectively with them? What's the best way for us to engage? And I'm sure, as a program, you maybe think through similar challenges. And how do we support individual investigators in that space? I think for the network, we were talking before, Scott, that there's perhaps a lot of overlap and between different initiatives that people are doing in Canada. And I really hope we can use the network to share what we're learning, what we're doing, what we're working on, what we're learning about, and use that to really strengthen the different collaborations that we have.
Yeah, no, I think we have similar issues we're dealing with. One is this is a departmental priority for us. So it's how do you engage the department? Because we really do want as many people involved as possible. So at our department retreat on Monday, this was one of the things we shared. And it was like some of the things we talked about for the network, which is letting people know what we're doing, right? Because we have a lot of great investigators, educators, people involved in policy, and yet they don't always know what we're doing with our partners. Or so just making sure we share. And I think that's probably on the network as well. We've talked about how the more we can know about what our partners are doing, and in some cases we're probably working in similar with closely related partners or in the same country, and we're not really working together. So I think sharing that information, letting people know what's happening is really important. And certainly I'm focused more on the education side. There's lots of opportunities for teaching and, and going. We've been, I see John Schreiner on there. We've been very fortunate to have John engaging. We have a number of medical oncologists, radiation oncologists, surgical oncologists, a few internists who are honorary oncologists. Our medical physics team has been very engaged. We probably need to do a better job of engaging other professions. So I think that's probably one of our challenges as well.
Yeah.
And Scott Yakov would like to ask
Okay.
a question, so feel free to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, go ahead, Yakov. Yeah, go ahead, Yakov. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. I really appreciate your presentation. I mean, I think we met a number of years ago at the ICC and a couple of other opportunities. You have three people here in the audience from among the founders of MPWB, Medical Physics for World Benefit. And we are, of course, medical physicists, and a number of occasions we have seen problems in communicating, even when people approach us that they need assistance with training or the installation of new equipment and so on. And that's definitely something that we have seen time and again. I mean, that the communications between different actors, in particular in the low middle income countries, is not easy. And people sometimes don't quite know what is it that they need, and that's normal, because I mean, somebody being thrown in a situation where they need to install new equipment, commission new procedures, and so on. They have no access to the knowledge and experience of colleagues. Sometimes people work almost in isolation, I would say. It has been our experience that, I mean, sometimes, they will bring new equipment into a country without the medical physicist altogether. I mean, not to talk about sometimes that there is one person that is really inexperienced, just out of either an academic course or, initially a training program. So that's something that, I mean, we see time and again. And I think collaboration in this aspect, I mean, is really important. And there are other organizations, like even the International Atomic Energy Agency, that also, on occasion, they will look for assistance on some of these projects. And, that's so there is not just the academic program, but the training seems to be one of the biggest hurdles in increasing the availability of professionals at least in radiation oncology, as we see it. Probably John and Jake have their own view on this.
Okay, well, thanks, Yakov.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments for Danielle? Fidel.
Thanks, Danielle. That was a good presentation on the good work that you're doing. I have a question regarding the gold program. There's a lot of evidence that through education, we actually get a lot of brain drain, especially from low-income countries. How to manage there is so that people who are coming for short courses or 1 year, 2 years, go back actually to impact their societies where they live, especially some that come from countries without some of these specialists that are coming together.
I think it's an important question and issue that's every institution, I think, involved in training medical graduates is grappling with. We want to support people to develop excellence in different domains and their clinical expertise. I think that the way that we've designed GOLD has been really to bring people from different environments together, and has been not so much around developing leadership skills and training that's only applicable in Canada, but that is more broadly applicable in broader health systems. I think the question around how do you encourage people to go back, it's also about having a conversation before they come around what are their objectives, what are their expectations, how do we best align what they're learning here with what they need in their home environment as well. I think it's an ongoing challenge, and I think supporting them when they go back as well. So, we had one fellow, maybe I can give an example. One fellow, Ava Scott, who is from Ghana, and she came to Princess Margaret to learn about more advanced radiotherapy techniques for cervical cancer. And when she was here at Princess Margaret, she participated in our GOLD program and was one of the ASCO awardees as well, and became involved in different research on health services research, health economics in Ghana. And when she went back, she's now implemented some of the skills and techniques that she learned at Princess Margaret in her institution in Ghana. The team there has been very excited about it. And she then applied with her team in Ghana and with some of her mentors from Princess Margaret for one of our seed grant awards to actually support the implementation and move toward sort of 3D conformal radiotherapy and IMRT for cervical cancer, which was a priority that they as a institution identified. And some of her physicists are now planning to come for a placement here. So what we've been trying to do is give them, I think, equip people with skills that they can take home and implement, and not let the support sort of end when they leave, but actually try to support them in an ongoing basis when they go back. So I don't have a perfect answer to your question, but I think that's one example of how we've tried to support trainees when they go back to their home institutions. But I'd be curious to know what you think as well about that issue.
Yeah, it's a complex issue because, as you say, some of them come and train and they can't actually practice what they have learned from here. And so there's always that thinking, should I go back and not practice what I've learned, or should I stay and practice what I have learned? And I think the way to approach it is actually, as you say, I think it's having a conversation before someone comes and having a strategy before the person comes.
So just for those online, just continue the discussion on brain drain and people who come for advanced training in Canada, or a program like Princess Margaret has. How do we prevent brain drain? Dr. Rubagumia has acknowledged it's a complex issue, but affirmed, just so people who haven't heard, affirmed the importance of having that conversation beforehand. So thanks, Fidel. Any other questions? Great discussion. Okay. If not, thanks very much, Danielle. Danielle will also be presenting Oncology Grand Rounds tomorrow at 8. So please tune in for that. And thanks again.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.